Kim, you're muted, so tell us. All right, welcome to IJKL, the Institute of Jewish Knowledge and Learning, for our special Pesach event called The Four Voices, based on the four children of the Haggadah. And we have four distinguished panelists who are going to play the role of each of those. They actually will introduce themselves and tell you how they want to be known, what their characteristics are. Each of them have different characteristics, just like the four children in the Haggadah. One difference is that they have grown up and learned a lot along the way that they will be sharing with us. So each of them are going to talk for a few minutes, and then there'll be a couple minutes for questions on that. So if you have questions along the way, put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to them after each panelist. And then hopefully there'll be a little time at the end for more questions. So without further ado, if I am not mistaken, our very first grown-up child will bring his voice, and that is Rabbi Mark Goldman. Take it away, Rabbi Mark.
Hi, everybody. Well, I've been given a role tonight, and it comes with this label, the wicked child. In Hebrew, Rasha. And, if I'm being honest with you, it kind of stinks, especially when you explore where it comes from and what it says about the person who is carrying that name. So I'd like to explore the label a little bit, not to reject it outright, but maybe to understand it in a little bit of a different way, and maybe even to redeem myself, that wicked son that I am. But let's just take 1 minute to begin with the origins of the Haggadah, the central text of the Passover Seder. It's not a single book that was given at Sinai, even though many of us have that Maxwell House Haggadah and think that that is the Torah. It's really evolved over many centuries, and it comes from the commandment in the Torah which says, tell your children the story of the Exodus. That's the origin. But the Haggadah that we know today, complete with all of its blessings and the traditions and the songs, as well as the four children, that really developed over time. It was by the 2nd century that the Mishnah outlined a basic Seder structure that is somewhat familiar with us today. And then we had the rabbis of the Talmud and the early Midrashic collections, adding the stories, the interpretations, and the rituals. And one of those collections is called the Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael, who was a 2nd century commentator on the book of Exodus, Shemot. And that really became the foundational source of the Haggadah. So all the way 1800 years ago from the Mechilta de Rabbi Yishmael. And it's here where we meet for the first time the Rasha, the evil son. This is where I first make my presence known. And the Mechilta takes its cue from a verse in Shemot chapter 13, verse 8, which says, and you shall tell your child on that day, saying, it is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. And the Mechilta kind of interprets this one verse, it's because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt, and says, well, there must be a conversation taking place, a conversation between a parent and a child. And then it says, well, the child must have asked something to warrant that response. So what did the child ask? The child said, what does this service mean to you? Mean to you, not to us. And the rabbis in the Mechilta take this very, very seriously. They say because he excludes himself, the Rasha, the evil one, excludes himself from the community, he denies the essence, meaning Judaism, the foundation of Judaism, what have you. And therefore, what do you do with such a person? You kind of punch them in the teeth. You blunt their teeth and you say to them, because of what God did for me when I came out of Egypt, for me, not for you. And guess what? Rasha, evil one, if you would have been there, you would not have been redeemed. And that should sound fairly familiar to many of us. We've read it for years and years, and it's echoed really through generations. Imagine, had you been there, you would not have been redeemed. It's really one of the harshest statements in the entire Seder. So I'd like us to take a second and pause and ask and reflect, what exactly is this child guilty of? He asked the question, what does it mean to you? Have any of us ever said to somebody, what do you mean by that? What does it mean to you? I'll tell you a little secret. Whenever anybody asks me a question and I'm not really sure of the answer, I say, well, what do you think? What does it mean to you? Maybe that's why I'm the Russia tonight. Somebody knew that. But what then is the problem with the Russia? What is the difficulty with this wicked person? Is it the question that he asks? Is it the pronoun that he uses? Is it the tone? Or perhaps it's something else. Perhaps it's the fear that the question evokes in the listener. Perhaps it is the fear that the question evokes in the listener. Maybe the wicked child is not wicked because of what he asks, but, and here's a little bit of a radical idea, the child is not wicked because of what he asks, but because of what we respond, because we feel threatened, maybe because we're unsettled in some way. We don't always know how to sit with discomfort, especially in a ritual which is designed to reinforce our Judaism, reinforce the tradition, and then we get a question like that, what does it mean to you? And what I think we often forget is that whatever the question is, however it's put, the wicked child is there. He's at the table. He participates, he engages, he asks. He may feel disconnected, he may feel alienated, even skeptical, but he is present. Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sachs, Alav Shalom, who I was blessed to have as a teacher of mine in Jews College many decades ago, he wrote, "The child who asks is not lost. It's the one who is absent who is in danger. The wicked child is present. That in itself is a form of connection, even if the tone is defiant, even if the question is uncomfortable. Presence is not nothing. Presence is everything." And I think that the fact that he's there, the fact that I am there, the wicked child is there, that should supersede anything to do with the question or the way I phrase the question, or the tone that is used. But I have another question, since it's Pesach. Who is that child today? Who is that child that questions, that feels alienated today? Maybe he's the secular Jew who doesn't feel comfortable or connected to synagogue life or community life. Maybe she's the Jew who asks hard questions about Israel. Maybe it's the converted Jew, or, and I hate this term, but I hear it and I hate it, but I'm going to say it anyway. Maybe it's the half Jew, the one with one Jewish parent. They've been told that they don't fit into the traditional mold. Maybe it's somebody who struggles with God, with faith, with the idea of divine intervention in history. Maybe she's the one who says, I want to feel something, but this Seder is just not doing it for me. And guess what? The temptation that we have then and now is to shut that person down, or to label him and say, your question means that you don't belong. Or worse, had you been there, you wouldn't have been redeemed. And my question is that really our role? Is that our place? Is that how redemption works? Surely, Jewish tradition is not afraid of questions. It honors questions. From Abraham to Job to the Talmudic sages, all of the tractates of this Talmud, full of questions, full of arguments. Pushback even against God. So why are we so harsh with this wicked child? Blunt his teeth. I mean, come on, really? The Talmud in Tractate Sanhedrin says that one who separates from the community denies the absence. One who separates themselves from the community denies the absence, but sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes it's the community that is separating. When someone feels alienated, excluded, not truly seen or heard, we can't simply point the finger and say, you left. Maybe it's because we never opened the door wide enough. And Rabbi Nachum of Breslau taught, sometimes the greatest distance from God is actually the place of return. The greatest distance from God is the exact moment when we start to turn towards God. And this theology, falling away, is not a break from the journey, it is part of the journey. And it's at this very point when the Rasha is so far away from God that we respond by saying, blunt his teeth? Yikes. Honestly, the wicked child might be the one who is the most honest. He challenges the ritual. He longs for meaning. He cares enough to ask the question. So what? What would happen if instead of saying you would not have been redeemed, we answered differently? What if we said, I hear you. You are struggling, but your question has a place here. You have a place here. What if we treated a questioning not as a threat to our tradition, but a sacred part of it? The Seder is, at its core, a remembrance, yes, but it's also a transmission. And what are we transmitting if we silence the question? What are we preserving if all we're doing is being the gatekeeper? I don't think redemption is anything that we can be the gatekeeper of. It's not ours to withhold. So this year I want to reclaim the wicked child, not to erase the label, but to reinterpret it. He's not wicked because of his question. He is the one who speaks from the margins, who says what others are afraid to say, who reflects our own doubts. And sometimes that's not easy to hear, but it is necessary, and it is part of our tradition. What if instead of rejecting him, we were to pull him closer, rather than declaring he would not have been redeemed? What if we said, you belong, even when you struggle, even when you don't believe, even when you're still searching? And I want to share something that happened personally to me and Sam recently, which reminded me how deeply this question of belonging still touches us today. We were at a store picking a mezuzah for our home, and it felt very sacred, choosing something that would mark our home as a Jewish home. While we were there, someone asked Sam if he'd like to put tefillin on, and he said, absolutely, sure, why not? He put tefillin on. It was just this beautiful, spontaneous, off-the-cuff moment. Then we went to pay for the mezuzah, and the man behind the counter chatting with him, said, why don't you come to my shul for Shabbos? Everything was beautiful, very, very friendly. And we said, oh, no, actually, we go to another shul. Where do you go? We go to Temple Kol Ami. Temple Kol Ami, the guy said, what kind of shul is that? It's a Reform synagogue, and we love it, which we do. And suddenly, the whole tone changed in an instant. The guy was like, that's not a shul. Better to go nowhere than to go there. In an instant, the welcome turned into a war. We went from insiders to outsiders, from seekers to suspect, even while we were buying a mezuzah. And I thought, this is what the wicked child experiences, to ask a question, to speak from a different place, and to be met not by curiosity or compassion, but with cold judgment of someone acting as a gatekeeper. The one who says, that's not real, better not to go at all. You wouldn't have been redeemed. You're the Russia. I'm going to blunt your teeth. And who are we to say that? There were Jews of all stripes, conservative, Orthodox, Reform, Reconstructionist, Jews by choice, Jews by birth, Jews who haven't been to shul or a community in ages, but still feel something, who still want to connect, and that too is Jewish. Being Jewish doesn't mean that we all pray the same way, practice this the same way, or believe in the same things. It means that we see something sacred in each other, even when our paths look different. Because we're all carrying something, the same history, the same longing to belong, the same love of Israel. And when we stop trying to view each other's worth, when we stop trying to act as the gatekeepers of redemption, when we make room for something bigger, that is holiness. There is one light and hundreds of different ways to illumine that. Some people light Shabbat candles, some post Jewish memes, some wear Jewish stars, some buy a mezuzah, some ask the hard questions at Seder. Some are the so-called Russia, and it's all real, it's all Jewish. Maybe that's what the wicked child was trying to say all along. Not, I don't care, but do I count? Not, I'm out, but will you still make space for me even when I see things differently? Our answer to that question at our Seder table and at our Jewish lives will determine not only his redemption, but ours as well. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Rabbi Mark. There were a couple questions in the chat. If people who posted them to me still want to ask them, just please go ahead. Or if they were answered, we will go on. I'll take that as a no. And there'll be time, as I said, for some questions and discussion at the end. Our next voice will be Rabbi Uri.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So if Mark was the Rasha, the evil one, I will be the simple one, the Tam. But I will be honest, I wasn't always the simple one. I used to be the stupid one, even the retarded one, the imbecile. I was all that. But in some way, I became the simple one. So I want to do something slightly different of what Rabbi Mark did is to take you to a journey through the sources, how we came of my transition from the foolish, the stupid, even the retarded in some translations, imbecile one, just the simple one. And to understand if the simple is a good idea or a parv term or not so good, and it's just another way to say somebody that is not smart enough. So let's go to the Haggadah. You're able to see the screen, right? Okay, I have 10 minutes, right? Something like that. 10 minutes is good? Okay, I will do my best. So in the Haggadah, we have this very beautiful saying, Keneged arba'a banim, the Torah relates to 4 types of sons, one who is wise, one who is wicked, one who is simple, and one who does not know how to act, right? I assume that in all your Haggadot, you have something very similar to that, okay? But if we go to the first source, the one that Rabbi Mark just mentioned, okay, in the Mechilta, it says as follows, Arba banim hem, there's 4 children, Echad chacham, one is wise, that one we know, Echad tipesh, and one is foolish, stupid, retarded, imbecile, everything together. Echad rasha, one is evil, Echad sheino yodea lishon, and there's one that does not know how to act. So from all the children, all the sons, 3 never change. We have them exactly like that for the last 1800 years or so. There's one that changed. Originally speaking, we have the wise one that asks complicated questions, deep questions. Then you have the Rasha, the evil one who excludes himself. Then you have the one that does not know how to act, so the father needs to open for him. And then you have the Tipesh. Okay? And what is very interesting is that in this case, is the Tipesh, the foolish one, if you want to call it, that asks, what is this for you? Masot, what is this? He asks, what is this? And the answer is, with a strong hand, the Lord brought us out of Egypt from slavery. Up to there. But look at this. This is very interesting what happened. In the Jerusalem Talmud, grabbing the same source, they changed the question that the Tipesh, the foolish one, asked, and gives the answer that is normally given in traditionally Haggadot to the smart one, to the wise one. It says, Mazot, Afed lamno ilchot Pesach. You need to teach the foolish one all the laws of Passover. What does the stupid, and in this translation is Tipesh as stupid. So I'm using all the references that I'm using and do it with intention, okay? Don't ever believe that I will use them in my regular life, but I'm using in this class with the dogs for you to understand. There's translations that they take Tipesh as foolish, retarded, stupid. In this case, it's stupid, and it's from the 1990s. What is this? Tell him the rules of Passover. The one may not follow the Pesach epikommon. Epikommon is what you all know as afikoman. Yes, the last piece of matzah, but epikommon does not really mean afikoman what we think it means, but it means, what means, it says, epikommon, going towards a party. The one not leave one company and join another company. So the rabbis wanted to reduce the amount of alcohol that people will drink during Passover, because Passover cannot become Purim. So they will say, if you finish drinking the 4 cups of wine in the Habura with 1 Habura of your friends of IJKL, don't go to a next Habura and start the Seder 2 hours later to drink another 4 cups. That's the afikoman. That's why you eat the matzah and you do not have anything else. The epikoman. But this is the question that is giving, or the answer that is giving to the foolish one. So look how we know, like, the Mechilta is the 2nd century, the Jerusalem Talmud, the 4th century. So we continue to talk for many centuries that we have 4 children, and one is a foolish one, stupid one. Even Rashi, 11th century already, 900 years ago, nothing in the Jewish history, says, Mazot, this is the question, זה תינוק טיפש שאינו יודע להעמיק שאלתו וסותם ושואל Mazot. Rashi says, the question of a dull child, in this translation, who has not sufficient understanding to question very profoundly, and who therefore asks in an indefinite fashion, what is this? If you are wise, you have a deep questions, Dad or Mom, why do we dip 2 times, or why do we have these symbols? It's a deep question. Foolish is, Mazot, what is this? Like, when you are not very able to speak a language, you speak a little bit foolish. Very concise ideas, not so well grammary putting, like when I talk in English. What is this? This is the question of him. But look what's starting to happen in the 12th century, only 800 years ago, in some parts of Europe. There's a change, because our tradition changed. And the Midrash Sechel Tov from Italy, from the 12th century, it says as follows: Mazot zo midat tam. He's the first one that says we are not going to call this child any longer the tipesh, the foolish one, but this is the attitude of, this is the attribute of someone tam. The ainu ben tipesh, it's like a foolish guy, but I'm going to start calling him tam. Simple one. שאינו מבין מדעתו ולא למד מאחרים ואינו רשע וחופר. He doesn't know by himself because he didn't learn from other people, but he's not a rasha, he's not an evil one, he's not a kofer, he's not an heretic. אלא בתמותו שואל מה זאת עבודה. In his simplicity. In his simplicity, he just asks, what is this? So instead of going from a foolish, an imbecile, somebody that is not smart at all, the Midrash Sechel Tov says, no, we are talking about someone that is not a learned person. It's a simple human being, simple Jew that asks the question, Mazot. So we cannot call this a foolish, stupid, imbecile. We cannot call him or her like that, but we are going to call this person Tam, simple. Then the Machzor Bitri, that are descendants of Rashi, in the same time, more or less, also has the same idea. Tam sheino lo chacham velo rasha ela tamim veino chacham lishol. Tam means he's a simple person, he's not a white one, he's not an evil one, he's just simple. So they put it in this category, between the white one, the best one, the rasha, the evil one, they put in the middle category the tam. It's somebody that wants to know, but doesn't have too many ways, because he really is new in the system. He doesn't know, he never learned. He asks in very simple terms. Look, like this is in Europe, right? In France, in Italy, they start changing in the 11th and 12th century. They start changing from tipesh, from foolish, to tam, to simple. But I come from Syria, Arab lands. Sometimes in Arab lands, it takes them a little bit longer. So even the Rambam, Maimonides, speaking from Egypt, in the late 12th century, he still says like this: it is a mitzvah to inform one's sons, even though they do not ask. You should tell your son, a father should teach his son according to the son's knowledge. How is this applied? If the son is young or foolish, he continues to use the same idea. He should tell him, my son, in Egypt, we were all slaves like this maid servant or this slave. Like we have slaves today in Egypt in the 12th century. We were like that. We were in that position of slaves. On this night, the Holy One, blessed be He, redeemed us and took us out to freedom. So up to here, 1 second. You have seen a transition in our Haggadah. First, there were 4 kids: the wise, the wicked, the one that did not know how to ask, and the foolish one. And then the rabbis understood this is not the right term. This is not the right word to be in our Haggadah. So this needs to change. So gradually, in the 11th and 12th century, from the tipesh, from the foolish one, a very aggressive term as we hear it, and all the other possible translations, we change just to be the simple one. But even today, okay, that's an upgrade. Okay, let's say that's an upgrade. But on the other hand, it says, could be even possible that it's better to be simple than to be the wise one? Because if I would ask all of us, from the 4 children, which one is the ideal? Most of us, and I will say many times, the Chacham, the wise one. But sometimes the wise one is too complicated to be the wise one. When you are too smart and when you have too many ideas in your head, everything becomes more complicated. And you know very smart people that complicate stuff just because they go and turn around. Sometimes it's better just to be simple, just to be calm. So that could be the best quality that we can have. And I will tell you something. To Abraham Avinu, Abraham our father, to Noah, the tzaddik, and to Jacob, they were never called the Chacham. They were never called wise. But each one of them were called Tam, were called the simple one. Noah was a righteous man, Tamim, the plural of Tam, in his generation. Noah walked with God. He's not called the wise one in his generation. He calls the simple one. Abraham, God commanded Abraham to do the covenant of the circumcision, and after it says, walk before me and be Tamim. What does God ask for us? Not to be wise, to be simple. Jacob is called Yaakov Ish Tam, Yoshev Oalim. Jacob was a simple man, a wholesome man dwelling in tents. So in the Jewish tradition, it's not only that we were able to change at some moment of history when we understood that a term, like even today, not so many decades ago, if you open any clinical book, the words retarded, imbecile, stupid, those are not just pejorative terms. They were just terms to talk about people who today we will call neurodiversity, people with different abilities. But it changed to be. That's on one hand. The Jewish tradition was able to do it in the 11th, 12th century to understand that we cannot keep talking about people that do not have knowledge foolish. But maybe we need to call them simple. And maybe from that simplicity, we can all learn a lesson. That maybe in life, the ideal son is not the wise one. It's not like Mark that he decides to be apart from the community like the Rasha. It's not the wise one, it's not the one that doesn't know how to ask, but it's the one that is very simple. And I think part of our tragedy of Judaism, that we started to complicate many things that could be much more simple. Something that could have nice, beautiful idea, like Shabbat, like Kashrut, like Tfilah. We overthink it, we overdid it, we did too many laws, too many ideas. We created something too huge that is impossible to grasp. So maybe one of the ideas in the Haggadah is to go back to the simplicity. Mazot. What is this? This is a night of celebration. This is a night that we celebrate freedom from Egypt. That's it. The details, they are in the book. But that question of simplicity is just good enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi Uri. So I have a question. If there was that realization so many years ago that it was not right to call one of the children foolish or stupid, why do you think there was no realization in connection with what Rabbi Mark said, to not call a child evil.
I don't know. Rabbi Mark can edit his own Haggadah and change the name of the Rasha. He's I don't know. At the end of the day, everything has to do with what the community accepts. In the Jewish tradition, it's what the community accepts. Today, all the changes, it will be much more complicated in a much more diverse and divided community. And all these changes before printed was easier to do. One, we start printing and everything became more canonical and the same. All those changes after that, it will be impossible. And I have another take. I think the Rasha is still a Rasha. When you think that this does not belong to you, you're a Rasha. You're an evil one. But I don't know. I thought it was always interesting to see this a very easy way to see, yes, things in the Jewish tradition. In the Haggadah by itself, the Haggadah has more versions than the Torah. The most printed book in the Jewish history is the Haggadah. The most versions of any kind of Jewish book is the Haggadah, and you have a very well-known change. From the Lilienthal, we changed. There's no more foolish kids. Now there's simple kids.
Thank you.
Okay.
I think we will move on to our next voice, which will be Sandra Lilienthal.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here with you tonight, but I will confess, I feel a little intimidated. You two know so much. I'm not really sure I belong here. I'm so confused. I really have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing now, what is expected from me. I have listened to everything you said, but I still don't even know where to start. You two know so much more than I do, and I'm feeling so ignorant right now. And there are a lot of people in this room. I don't want to expose my ignorance. You used a word, what was it? Mishnah? Something like that. Mechilta, tractates, son something. You put something up on the screen in letters that I can barely identify. By the way, is Rashi the same thing as Rasha? Besides, you have no idea what kind of past experiences I have had with Judaism and the Seder. Trust me, I have felt excluded more than once. I'm afraid to use this word inappropriately, but there's some level of trauma in my past experiences with Judaism and with Jewish rituals. I may have an emotional barrier here, but I'm not sure I have ever been able to connect the way I should to my religion. And so I really feel I don't belong here. I was once told that Judaism appreciates questions, that questioning is central to learning and to growth. I guess for Judaism, asking questions is the foundation for connection to your religion and your traditions. But if that's true, who am I? What am I? If I'm so ignorant, I can't even begin to formulate a question. Maybe I should just sit here quietly and hope no one notices me. Or maybe, you know what? Maybe I should just get up and leave. Okay, so I know this may have sounded really cute or ridiculous, you pick, especially since it's very clear that I'm not an actress. But I hope you also heard the pain in this child's voice. Oh, how easy it would be to just dismiss this one, to not pay attention to him or her, because at least they're there at the Seder with all of us, and they're not giving us a hard time like some other children are. Leave them alone, you may think. They're not bothering us. And we can all continue the Seder, engaging with the other children who actually have knowledge and seem to be much more engaged. Even the wicked child is connected in so many more ways. But here comes the Torah and says to us in Exodus 13:8, and you shall explain to your child on that day It is because of what God did for me when I went free from Egypt. A verse that is referenced in the Haggadah in the context of our obligation to bring in those who are silent, who are hesitant, who are unsure. Unlike the other children, this children does not initiate a conversation. Yet the text commands the parent to take proactive responsibility for their inclusion and their learning journey. Who are the ones who do not know how to ask today? They are the many Jews who feel alienated, those disconnected from Jewish tradition, feeling they lack the background to participate. They are adults who enter a Jewish learning space and assume everyone else already knows. I'm the only one that doesn't. And they feel so inadequate in that environment. They are the individuals who feel disconnected from Judaism due to painful past experiences, whether personal or communal. And one more important category to add. They are youth in a digital screen age who grew up in an era of passive consumption and struggle with questioning and critical thinking. They were never taught how to do that. All of these are people who are not ready for even a simple question, or they're simply too overwhelmed to be able to absorb what is going on around them. Our tradition teaches us that we must anticipate the questions that they might have, but can't yet articulate. We must initiate with an explanation, but one that is personal. This is done to celebrate what God did for me when I came out of Egypt. Having understood who this child is, we can appreciate the wisdom contained in the way that Haggadah deals with them, imposing on us not merely the obligation to start the conversation, but to tell this child how God performed miracles for me when I came out of Egypt. Not to exclude the child. The Haggadah teaches us that when we are addressing someone who does not yet know how to ask, we don't start with an academic list of subjects, or with complex and theoretical topics, or with details of Jewish law, or some ancient Jewish history facts. Rather, we open the conversation about God and Judaism from a relationship point of view. This is how I relate to God. And hopefully you too will find your way to connect with God. Knowledge of information may be important, but if Judaism doesn't inspire, feed, and strengthen our children spiritually, then it is quite possible that many of them will forever remain children who are not interested in asking questions. According to some commentators, every one of us has been that child at some point. Even if we have now become one of the other children, this was the early stage where all of us, even the wise child, started. But some are not able to move away from that stage. Some may still be afraid of making mistakes and lack confidence. Others may lack curiosity. It may be a child whose imagination and curiosity has been extinguished because their parents lacked the patience, the desire, or sufficient understanding to spend time with them in early childhood, answering their constant questions of, what's this? What's this? What's this? Why are we doing it? When are we getting there? And by not giving the time and the energy required, they have failed to keep the child's thirst to know alive. A parent's responsibility is to prompt a child who asks no question until they're ready to form their own questions, to encourage the child, to boost their confidence, to help them express themselves, to be a role model, to tell them miracles of our history and of the world, and to stimulate their imagination. Not simply to wait for the child to ask questions, but to initiate the learning process and to teach even if the child asks no questions. Other commentators mention the fact that the one who doesn't know enough to ask actually represents a large segment of society who don't reflect, don't analyze, and therefore don't question. Their lives are just spent in cycles of work, relaxation, entertainment, and weekends, vacations. They're satisfied with just getting up in the morning, going to work, paying their bills, keeping their families fed and clothed, and having as much fun as their personal circumstances permit. To them, that's all there is to life. And trying to convey to them a message of a higher purpose falls on deaf ears. Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote in The Insecurity of Freedom, and I quote, "The problem of our youth is not youth. The problem is the spirit of our age, the vapidity of values, emptiness in the heart. The central problem is that we do not know how to think, how to pray, how to cry, how to resist the deceptions of too many persuaders. The problem will not be solved by implanting in youth a sense of belonging. Belonging to a society that fails in offering opportunities to satisfy human needs will not soothe the sense of frustration and rebellion. What youth needs is a sense of significant being, a sense of reverence for the society to which we all belong. We prepare pupils for employment, for holding jobs. We do not teach them how to be people, how to resist conformity, how to grow inwardly, how to say no to their own selves. We teach them how to adjust to the public. We do not teach them how to cultivate privacy. What lessons do we want to teach our children? What are the best ways for teaching moral lessons? Why are there Jews that don't even bother asking? Perhaps the only Judaism they studied was completely irrelevant to their lives. It's quite possible that the son who doesn't know how to ask questions even attended a synagogue, went to Hebrew school, but always heard the same repetitive and uninspiring preaching. Or learned Judaism up to the age of 12. And as an adult, that seems so irrelevant. And so they conclude that Judaism is not for them. People conventionally understand the Seder to be about getting children to ask questions. But I will say it's much deeper than that. It's about provoking curiosity. Curiosity is more profound. It's what makes us care enough to ask questions in the first place. To be curious is to show interest, and to be interested enough to want to know more. It's a fascination that is expressed through a question that arises in your mind. To be curious is to be alive. Without it, we are deadened to the joy and novelty of life. We become cynical, apathetic. We stop caring. And once we stop caring, we also stop asking questions. If we look closely, the Hebrew words describing this child, she'einu yodea lish'ol, don't really mean one who doesn't know how to ask, at least not in a literal sense. It means one who doesn't know to ask. That is, one who doesn't even think to ask questions. We try to open up such people, to take them out of their shells, for by doing so, we are able to help lead them out of their own narrow Egypt, as the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim, literally means narrow places. And how do we do that? By creating and offering welcoming learning environments, offering non-judgmental spaces where all questions or lack thereof are valued. Places where we encourage curiosity, where questions are not only valued but taken seriously. Environments where your previous level of knowledge is not as relevant as your willingness to engage with our tradition, our texts, and our community. So this year, before next Saturday, which basically gives you 9 days, I encourage you to ask the following question. Who in my community today represents the one who does not know how to ask? And how can I take responsibility to bring them in? Thank you.
Gosh.
Thank you, Sandra. I think Kim let me know that she has a question. Do you have a question, Kim?
I'll wait till the end to see if the wise son answers it for me.
Probably
Oh.
not. Uh,
Rabbi Jeff needs no introduction. Please
And-
take it away.
and I'm going to explain to you why I'm last. I asked to be last because the verse that gives birth to the wise child is actually at the end of the Torah. The other verses that give birth to the other children are in real time. They're in the book of Exodus in chapters 12 and 13. But the wise child isn't born until the next generation. By the time the wise child is born, the other children are dead. And so I thought that chronologically I should go last. But the big mistake that I made was not realizing that I would have to follow Sandra. And so Mark and Uri, don't ever let me do that again. Okay. But let me talk a bit about the wise child, because if you don't know much, it would seem that the wise child is the hero. Okay, the wise child is, that's what I want to have. I want to have the wise child. And to a certain extent, that's true. The rabbis, as Mark explained, who kind of canonized the order of the Haggadah that we have today, they certainly thought that the Chacham was the best. I want to share my screen to show you where all this is coming from. Ooh, it says sharing is not turned on. So can someone make me a co-host, please? Someone who is a host, can you make me a Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Yeah, here. Okay. I'll make this bigger so you can see it. In Deuteronomy, the end of the Torah, it's not the end of the Torah, but it's the last book of the Torah. Changing glasses, sorry. When in the time to come, meaning machar, the next day, your children ask you, I don't know why it says children, it's child. What mean the decrees, laws, and rules that God, Hashem, has enjoined upon you? And by the way, here, the Chacham uses the word you too. When Rabbi Mark was talking about the wicked son, you as opposed to us, you as opposed to me. The wise child uses the same language. And what's the answer? You shall say to your child, we were slaves to Pharaoh in Egypt, and Hashem freed us from Egypt with a mighty hand. Hashem wrought before our eyes marvelous and destructive signs and portents in Egypt against Pharaoh and all of his household, and got us, Hashem freed from there in order to take us and give us the land promised on oath to our ancestors. And then Hashem commanded us to observe all of these laws, to revere Hashem. Okay. That's where this question comes from. When Moses is talking to the next generation, he talks about a chacham, a child who asks a very interesting question. What are the decrees, the laws, and the rules? What's going on here? I want to know the specifics. I want to know the details. I want to know the nitty-gritty here. What's happening? So I'm going to speak about me, the wise son, in a positive way first. But it's not only positive. In the next generation, perhaps, the question is not why, but how. In the book of Exodus, it seems that all of the questions had to do with, why are you doing this? In some way or another, either asked or unasked, why are you doing this? What's happening here? 40 years later, when Deuteronomy happens, I am not asking why this is happening. I'm asking how to do it right. Is there a right way and a wrong way to do it? It's a very different question. It's a very different tone. Or perhaps, and this is what I actually do believe, in the previous generation, we're talking about people who had a direct experience with God. They had an absolute direct experience with God. They witnessed the 10 plagues. They witnessed the splitting of the sea. They witnessed the manna. They witnessed the water coming from the rock. And so their questions are in the context of, I know what I saw. I know that this is happening, but I need clarity about why we're doing what we're doing. But in Deuteronomy, this child didn't see that. And perhaps the wise child who does not have direct experience realizes that God is in the details. You in the previous generation, you didn't need the details because you were witness to the event. You don't have to teach a survivor of Auschwitz the history of World War II. But me? Maybe you do. Because I didn't see it with my own eyes. And so I need to understand it differently. I need to see it in the details. What is it that we're supposed to do? How are we supposed to learn it out? In a sense, to use the language which I have to tell you, my teacher, Kim, has taught me to use. The Chacham is making the transcendent imminent. For the previous generation, God was imminent. God was right there. But in the next generation, God isn't. I didn't see a sea split. How can I make a transcendent God imminent? And this is the Chacham who wants to know what the halacha is, the Chacham who wants to know what the, to put it in modern terms, what does the Shulchan Aruch say? What is it? Why do we do this? Why do we care about all these little laws? Because it is in these little laws that the transcendent God becomes imminent. God becomes real. God becomes tangible. God becomes right in front of me. God becomes that which I'm doing, not some big abstract thing. So the Chacham is interested in taking something which wasn't necessary the generation before, but is necessary now. How do I make God imminent to me? That's the upside. And by the way, that's the hero for the rabbis of the Talmud. For the rabbis of the Talmud, the person who wants to make a transcendent God imminent through an understanding of the technicalities and the specifics and the details of how you go about doing things, this kid is the poster child for the rabbis of the Talmud. And so they give him the title, the child, Chacham. Just switch for a second. What's the problem? In the Haggadah that the rabbis wrote, when the child comes and says, what are all these decrees and rules and laws that God has enjoined? What are you supposed to say? Well, if you look in the Haggadah, it says, you must tell him the laws of Pesach. And after eating the Pesach offering, one does not eat anything more. I refer back to Rabbi Mark's remark. Was it Rabbi Mark who spoke about Afikoman? He was right. Okay. Afikoman means the end of the Seder, that no more partying, no more drinking, no more eating, that the taste of matzah should be the last taste in your mouth. Good, fine. That's what in the Haggadah, the rabbis tell the answer to the question is, go teach them the halacha. Go teach them the halacha from the very beginning of the Seder until the very end of the Seder. Except in the Torah, that's not the answer that the Torah tells us to give to this child. In verse 21, you shall say to this child, we were slaves in Egypt, and Hashem freed us with a mighty hand and brought before our eyes marvelous and destructive signs and portents in Egypt against Pharaoh and all of his household. And God took us out of there and gave us to the land. And then look at verse 24. Hashem commanded us to observe all these laws, to revere the God Hashem. The rabbis, when they deify the Chacham, they say, the answer to your question is, I'll give you all the halachas you want. But the Torah takes a different view of this child. The Torah, I think, almost assumes that this child is losing the forest through the trees. That sometimes we know that God is in the details, and we know that in the details, a transcendent God becomes immanent. We know that. But there's a downside, there's a dangerous side, that when the details become the ends in themselves and not a means to a greater end, then you can start focusing on the trees and you will never see the big, beautiful, wonderful, amazing, awesome forest. The rabbis rejected verses 21, 22, 23, and 24 for their own agenda. But when we know and we see, the Torah comes to remind us that this child who's interested in details and particulars, yes, this is a good thing, but it can turn into a bad thing. And therefore, let's remind this child, yes, you want to know details, you want to know halachas, but don't lose sight of the big picture. Because sometimes immanence can cancel transcendence. And when that happens, all is lost. It's a balance. It's a tightrope. The rabbis go to one side. The Torah itself goes to the other side. But we, the lifelong learners, who are in many ways the Chacham, we want to know the details. We have to see both sides. We have to know, on the one hand, that transcendence becomes immanence by knowing the details, by knowing the halachas. We also have to know, by being overly concerned with the halachas, we lose the big, beautiful picture of what's actually happening. Thank you, everyone. And I won't follow Sandra ever again. So, let me stop my share. Sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi Jeff. Yeah, so we definitely have some time for questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand or just jump in. I see Jackie and then Kim.
So what I find really fascinating is not just that there are 4 different types of children who are brothers, who obviously live in the same house and have the same experiences and the same parents, and yet are so completely different from one another, but how different the parents have to be in order to parent each one of those different children. So maybe if someone wants to just comment on that.
Scott, can I very quick answer? You have, in the picture of the Haggadah, this is a parenthesis. It is a pedagogic reminder to the leader of the Seder that not everyone who's sitting at your table thinks the same way. And that therefore your responsibility as the leader of the Seder is to be able to address everyone who's sitting at the table, even if they're coming from different places. So your question is a perfect question, because that is the only, like, you can ask, we're supposed to tell about the Exodus from Egypt. Why are we taking this divergence to talk about these 4 crazy kids? And the answer is because it's a pedagogic instruction to the leader of the Seder. Don't think that your answer is going to work for everyone. You have to know who's sitting at the table and where they're coming from, and tell the story in a way that everyone's going to appreciate.
Kim, go ahead.
Thank you, Rav Jeff. It seems that all of you, sort of, have indicated that we evolve from simple to can't ask, and that ultimately the wise child is, if we're fortunate, we become that. But I've also learned at the table of Rabbi Akiva, and probably from 1,000 other places, that in fact, we are all 4 children, all of our lives. So with this in mind, I refer to Rabbi A.J. Heschel, who says, in the good question is the answer. So the question has to do with, how do we discover when or how we are each of the child all of the times in our lives? Or do you agree that it is static and that we evolve, or in fact, we are all?
I want to jump in here and say that I don't like the idea of evolve, because it does put one as bad and one as good. Like, this is the ideal, right? Until you get there, you're not there yet. I think there's a little bit of fluidity here. As Jeff said, being the wise son, depending on when, where, how, is wonderful. And depending on when, where, how, it's actually not that good.
Right.
So I don't like the evolution idea here, but I do like the idea that in different moments of our lives and in different topics of our lives, we are in one place or in another, right? The wise, if you take I'm using this, of course, because it's my world. If you take a Jewish educator as an example, I bet that the 4 of us sitting here are much better at some things and not as good in other things. I've always said, like, Kabbalah is not my strength, right? So am I the wise one, or I'm the one that doesn't know how to ask, or I'm the simple one? It depends. It's not that it's not a stamp. It's fluid. And so that's how I look at it, Kim.
I would like to add one thing as well to what Sandra said, which is, I agree it's not necessarily like a transition or an evolution. But another idea I was thinking about is that we can become, or we are, each of those 4 different kinds of personalities depending upon who we are interacting with. And sometimes it calls on the wise. Sometimes maybe it calls upon the simple to see, not to get too crazy. I love what Rabbi Uri said. It was really, really interesting. I have questions for him, but I can ask him that tomorrow. But sometimes we have to be we are all of those people, and we have to know when to choose each of those parts of us, depending upon who we are coming into contact with and depending upon what our objective is.
Thank you. Barbara, go ahead, please.
Thank you. First, I want to thank all 4 presenters. You were all wonderful. And my question's for Rabbi Jeff. It's just a small curiosity. You had talked about the rabbis leaving out the final verses for their own agenda. And I was just curious what that agenda was.
No, I thank you, Barbara. What I wanted to say, and if I didn't say it clearly, I'm sorry, that the rabbis of the Mishnah and later on the Gemara and the Talmud, they're interested in the details. Okay, they're interested in whether Shabbos starts at 4:26 or 4:28. This is the foundational work of the halacha. And in doing this, they genuinely believed that they were going to discover God. They were going to draw closer to God. So when they see this verse in Deuteronomy of a child who asks questions about the laws and the statutes and whatever, they're in love. They're in love. But they too, I think, and I'm sorry, and therefore they ignored the Torah's answer to this child and created their own answer. What's their own answer? Teach him the halacha. Teach him everything that there is that he wants to know or she wants to know till the very end. My point was that in ignoring the Torah's answer, the rabbis were taking a very big risk, because we all know that people who are involved with halacha, and by the way, people who are involved with halacha for the most part have a relationship with God that people who aren't have trouble with. But it is very easy to lose the forest through the trees. Once you get involved with the Shulchan Aruch and the halacha, and whether or not Shabbos is at 4:26 or 4:28, and that's what the Torah seems to want to answer this child by saying, don't lose the big picture. The big picture is what's important. So it's a tightrope. We're all on this tightrope. And I hope that answered the question.
Marcia, go ahead.
Thank you. I have so many more than 4 questions. Not sure which one to ask. So the first thing that actually comes to mind for me is what almost everybody in this room might know if they've had a class with Akiva, and what every single one of us who did have classes with Akiva has shared with each other. Do you remember the first time you asked him a question? Yep, Kim. And he sat silently for what seemed like forever, because although you thought, well, I must have asked a ridiculously stupid question because he won't even answer me. He had what is truly, I think, the mark of wisdom, to be listening for what you were asking, really asking. Sometimes he knew better than you did, like a great therapist. You know, he knew, and he acknowledged the best way that people learned. He knew that was different. He would have given a different answer to everybody who answered that question, because he could read what you were struggling with. So when I think of simple versus wise and everything in between, I do think that in a way, Rabbi Segelman, saying that the Chacham, the wise, are engaged with the detail. The wise can see the big picture. It's like Pardes. Which is detail and which is big picture? Right. Are you dealing with just what it says, which you have to know? But when you get down to the detail level, when it's the secret level, what does it really mean? All of those words kind of, I don't know, blend together. And just one last thing, my mom, on her gravestone, is a paraphrase of a song, and it says, "'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where you need to be." My mother told me from the time I was this big, you would be so much happier if you just stopped thinking so much. And I tell you what, till I found a group of people who are as interested in asking questions and thinking and providing 10 answers, not differences of opinion, just 10 ways of looking at it, that I have not been tormented by my questions. So, and the people that I know that don't ask, they're perfectly happy. Unlike what Sandra painted, you know, that their life is maybe narrow and not full. That's what I always thought. But for some of them, their life is easy and fulfilling. They have love and meaning. They just have it at a pashat level, and they do not suffer the way I do and many of the people in this room have. That's all.
Thank you, Marcia. Joan, I think you'll be the last question before me, because I have one.
Thank you. And Marcia, thank you so much for what you just shared, because you opened up a question for me that sent me to my phone to look up the definition of simple. Because I've been sitting here saying, I have a whole different meaning or take on simple, son. And the discussion we had about evolution and that where you are is better than where you were. I don't necessarily agree with that interpretation of evolution either. I see evolution as something that builds on the thing before it, and you wouldn't have it unless you had the prior, and so on. So what I wanted to say from that discussion, from looking up the definition of simple, which on my phone says 1, easily understood or done, presenting no difficulty, which is, Marcia, what you were relating as I heard it. 2, plain, basic, or uncomplicated in form, nature, or design without much decoration or ornamentation. So taking this definition, Marcia sharing everything that our rabbis shared with us, I see all of these different sons as being different aspects of the same and the one. And I don't know if I'm being clear. What more can I say about it? You can be simple and you can be wise. You can be wise and not know what question to ask, because you don't know the question. Not knowing what question to ask can be the wisdom. And if you're not taking the translation of wicked, but rather honest, that is, it might not be the translation, but that could be the meaning for a child who can't relate. Just being honest. And what's the 4th that I'm missing? Somebody help.
I think you covered them.
Now, I only said 3, but in any event, they can all be one and the same, different aspects of the same person, even at the same time. And I never got that before. So thank you so much tonight. And I don't even know if I'm right.
But thank you for that anyway, Joan. The other day, Sandra, you talked about the 5th child who isn't even there. If you want to say a couple words about that, that might be interesting. And also it relates to my question, which is, there's sort of somebody in between the one who isn't there and all these others, which are people who are just there for dinner, don't really care. Not children, not adult children, just people, adults. What's your advice for them?
Let me start with the one that's not there. I think the one that is not there is maybe the one that we should be doing the most work to bring in, because he or she is sort of a mix of all of these, right? It's somebody who's wise enough to question the rituals. It's somebody who doesn't really know what to ask, because if they're questioning, it's somebody who is wicked, not wicked in the sense of evil, but in the sense of, this is not for me. I don't even want to hear more about it. So it's a whole mix here. And I think that these are the ones that we should really be worried about and trying to bring in. Now, in order to bring those in, you do have to go back to what Rabbi Jeff said, which is knowing that that means adjusting your Seder to include those, right? Because that's yet another level of pedagogy in how to reach them. So I think that that one's there. The ones that come just for dinner, I'm totally happy with those. And I mean this seriously, because those that are there only for dinner have not lost the connection, even if they don't see the point. And if they're still connected, I'm good with that. We haven't lost them. If that is their way, their connection to Judaism is through a family dinner, so be it. They're connected to their Judaism through a family dinner, and how wonderful it is that they're coming and joining us and asking for the dessert or whatever else it is that they came for. So that's my idea.
Can I add to Sandra's answer?
Please.
When I was a boy, and I'm Baal Tshuva, I didn't grow up in an observant home. I had an aunt. I grew up in Boston, so I'm going to say Aunt Sadie, and Aunt Sadie every year at the Seder, somewhere around like when we broke the middle matzah at the beginning, or asked the 4 questions, would say, "We did this last year. Let's eat." And I want to completely agree with Sandra, but I want to give her a proof text because as I got older and I figured this out, I said to my Aunt Sadie, I said, you know, we just read that Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah and Rabbi Tarfon, they all sat in Bnei Brak and they talked about the exodus from Egypt all night. So Aunt Sadie, do you think we know more about the exodus from Egypt than Rabbi Akiva did? If Rabbi Akiva could figure out how to talk about this, the exodus from Egypt all night, then we can probably do this for 20 minutes. And you know, because I think the Haggadah answers that question. I think the Haggadah anticipates the question, the anticipates the person who has just come for dinner with the story of the 5 rabbis at Bnei Brak, and gives the leader the answer to the question of, look, I know you've come for dinner, but the moment that you think you know everything, well, that's when you're wrong. Because if Rabbi Akiva can do this all night, we can do it for 20 minutes. And they anticipate that.
I would like, sorry.
I just want to know if that satisfied Aunt Sadie.
You know what? Aunt Sadie didn't have a choice because my grandfather, Oliver Shalom, who was Aunt Sadie's brother-in-law, actually she was my great aunt. He was running the Seder, and I was his favorite grandchild. So if I said something, it was completely gold. And yeah, it was fine. I won. I always.
I'd like to add something to what Rabbi Jeff said, which is I think it is incumbent on all of us as ongoing learners, continuing, to learn and appreciate everything Judaism and the Haggadah and Passover speaks to us, is to come to the Seder, if we're hosting the Seder, and understand all of the people who are coming and where they're coming to and where they're coming from. Come to the Seder with a question which is going to excite people, which is going to cause engagement to those around. And maybe it's less important to go through all of the rituals and all of the specificities and all of, it's important to us, but maybe it's going to bore other people. So maybe find a briefer way to do that and to come right to a question, which is going to interest, which is going to inspire, which is going to resonate with the people who are at our Seder. And it's going to be different in every single Seder. And I also wanted to push a little bit back against something what Rabbi Jeff said, who is my teacher as well, which is
That's how I learn, Mark. I learn when people push back against me.
which is, maybe the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud who were so excited about the wise child, right, because of all of the questions that he asked, maybe it wasn't just because they thought that this was the way to connect with God, but maybe there was also some self-interest there and some self-preservation,
Right.
because
And if I could answer, Rabbi Mark is 100% right. The rabbis of the Talmud were trying to convince a population at large that the Torah could be interpreted to include many, many, many different halachot and many different ways of looking at things and doing things. And so, and clearly they used the wise, what they called, because the Torah doesn't call him chacham, they called this child chacham, and they used it almost as a kind of marketing tool. Yes, there is no question. I think it behooves us, teachers in the 21st century, to point out that the rabbis ignored the Torah at this point, because the Torah wanted the chacham, what they called the chacham, to see the big picture, whereas the rabbis were perfectly happy to have the chacham see the trees and not the forest. And that's the tightrope, and I think you and I both understand that we know what Judaism demands of us, and we know we want to do it, quote unquote, right, but we don't want to get so involved with what's right that we miss the big picture and we lose the Kadosh Baruch Hu in the process. And that's the tightrope of the Chacham. So
Thank you, Rabbi Jeff. Sandra, you get the last word.
Thank you, guys. I'm happy that the men here understand that women always get the last word. No, seriously, I would like to make a comment on, Kim, you mentioned about the people that come and are hungry. And I happen to have a lot of family members who either are not Jewish or became Jewish. And we do the full Seder, which basically means first of all, we do not sit down until it's dark. So we're not sitting down at 6 o'clock. And number two, we read the entire Haggadah, which basically means that after you sit down and start, it takes about an hour until you get to the food, and that it's in the best case scenario. And these people would be very upset and would complain every year. Every year they would complain. And I would get annoyed that they were complaining, because guess what? I'm also hungry, right? And then one day in talking to my rabbi, who is an Orthodox rabbi, and I mentioned this, and he looked at me and said, why are they not eating before? And I said, what does that mean? And he said, there's no prohibition to eat before. You can't make kiddush before it's dark. So this Orthodox rabbi basically said to me, sit down at 7 o'clock at night, serve the salad, serve the soup, serve so like feed them. And then when it's dark, you start making kiddush and going through the whole thing. But by then nobody's really hungry. And then they can put up with that hour. And it was like such an eye-opening situation where it's not just that I would tell them, why don't you eat before you come? Or why don't you go into the kitchen and get yourself some food? It was that we actually started the family dinner and had everybody together and started talking about a whole bunch of things. And then we made kiddush when it was proper to make kiddush by our custom. And everybody was happy. And it was such a simple solution that I had never thought about. So I'm sharing this with you because I do believe that if you don't know how to make it work for everyone, reach out to somebody and ask for ideas. And most likely, there are those of us who can help you find a way to make it possible and enjoyable to all of the people that are around the table, even if you have very different people around the table. So that's why I wanted to share that story.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Rabbi Jeff. Thank you, Rabbi Mark, Rabbi Uri. This has been really, really special.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
And remember, IJKL will be on a little Pesach break, but we will be back after with some new classes, and I guess they're
Yeah,
all new,
we're
right?
starting the summer semester the first week of May, and we have some amazing classes with all of our amazing teachers and some new ones as well. We are really, really excited. So stay tuned.
But we're not stopping so fast. Tomorrow morning at 10:30, we're still going to do the
Oh, sorry. Yes, you're still on tomorrow, Rabbi Jeff. Great. For our discussion of the weekly Torah portion.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
And so the word of the evening is appetizers.
Thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom, everyone.
Bye.
Shabbat shalom and Chag Sameach.
Thanks,
Mark,
What a
Rabbi Mark,
beautiful community.
Mark,
Amazing.
thank you so much, Mark. This was beautiful.
Thank all of you. Thank Kim and thank Scott and everybody. You all made this an amazing, amazing experience. Thank you all.
I have a lot of thinking to do about how to make my Seder work for a few very special people, and I look forward to reporting back with the successful outcome based on your.
That should be our next program right after Pesach. A special report. And Jackie, go to bed.
Depends on the matzo balls.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Chag Sameach.